Welcome to Business Success Tips, where you learn to make more money in less time and have a lot more fun. My name's Paul Sanneman. I'm founder of Contractor Staffing Source, where we help contractors build great teams. My guest today is Alex Horton from Alex Horton Creative. So, Alex, tell them what you do. Tell the
That's a
audience what is Alex Horton Creative does.
yeah, that's a great question. And I love that you kind of led off right before we started the call with I'm looking forward to figuring out exactly what you do, which is also a good lesson for me to make sure I get that right too. But what I do is I work with contractors and construction adjacent businesses. So that might be vendors, commercial insurance or equipment dealers, things like that, and help them accurately communicate who they are and what they do and what about them is unique and like makes sets them apart in their market. So they attract the right kind of people, the right kind of opportunities, the right kind of trade partners.
So, how would you work for, let's say, a remodeling company? All right.
Yeah.
Remodeling company has a bunch of subcontractors they deal with. How can you help the remodeling company make more money in less time and have more fun?
Sure. Well, I mean, that's the dream for every business.
Yeah.
With a remodeling company, I think probably one of the um, similar to probably a lot of residential, but not necessarily builders. Um, they're trying to kind of source, where are the actual like clients coming from?
Mhm.
And so what I would do if I was working with a remodeling company is to kind of help them align what's the thing that you think makes you special, the thing that you do that's unique in your market, that is first class. What is that thing? And then does the market, does your industry, does, your kind of standard ideal client profile, do those kinds of people know that to be true about you? And sometimes like that is true, and like they've companies have really like nailed that down. But a lot of times it's like, well, we believe that we are first class in these three things. And then when they kind of either show their website or, if they have done any video or any social content, but when you talk to people in their market and they would say, oh, I guess maybe they're a home builder. I don't really know what they do. And so there's often a disconnect between the thing that they're extremely good at and what prospects or non-customers know to be true about them. And so I think what I would do with a remodeling company is nail down what is that thing that makes them special, and then you would set up some sort of like content strategy that specifically speaks to those things, and then whether that's video, whether that's a podcast, whether that's some kind of social campaign, but trying to really consistently tell that story so that kind of across like the industry that they're working in, across the city that they're working in, everybody's really on the same page in terms of like, all right, those guys are great at this. And I think the closer that we can get the reputation that they've earned from their existing clients, the closer you can get that reputation with what people who've never worked with them know about them, I think the better set up they are for success.
Now, what about communicating with their subcontractors? Do you work on that too?
Yeah, it really just depends. Certainly, I've done a good bit with subs as well. With them, some of it is trying to get everybody aligned with, like what is the thing we're trying to do at the end of the day. I would say internally with the sub, often those companies, I've at least in my experience, can be a lot bigger than the actual GC's workforce. Obviously they're kind of
Right.
managing the project, they're running the project, but those subs can have a pretty substantial labor force, a pretty substantial team in the field, and because that team is often so spread out. I mean, we're in the world, we're in the age of remote work, but you know, businesses that have like a substantial field crew, they understand the challenges of remote work, except so many of their employees are not on their computer all day. They're away from their computer. They're heads down. And so it's like, how do you get all of those people who are distributed sometimes that's around a city, sometimes that's around a state, sometimes that's nationwide. How do you get all those people on the same page and get them to believe that they're part of something bigger than just what feels like their small company they work for on their particular job site?
So can
And
you
so,
give me an example of somebody who actually did that for you? You have to give their name, but just sort of how it actually worked for them.
yeah. So, was working with a mass excavation contractor here in Nashville, Tennessee, and one of the challenges that they found was the company was started by, similar to a lot of companies like this, that somebody bought a skid steer and then started grading driveways. And then the company grew, and then they had to hire a second guy to work with them. Then they built out their first crew, and then they grew and grew and grew from there. And so many of these kinds of leaders who like were thrust into a CEO type position because they grew their company and were such experts in that field, they go from being somebody who leads a crew to now they're an executive in a substantial business. And what he was finding was he either didn't know a lot of like the people they were hiring, and that was really foreign to him, because he was the person making all the decisions, all the hiring decisions. And
Mhm.
he had scaled up to where he wasn't doing that, but he's like, I don't know a lot of these people. When I see them come in the door, I don't know who it is. But he said what he found to be a bigger problem was when he would walk down the hallway in their office. If they're having a training event or uh, like a Christmas party, something like that. And they walk down the hallway, and guys that he knows are out in the field, he maybe doesn't know their name or something like that, but he would walk past them and they would either avoid eye contact or they would see him and say, like, hi, Mr. Smith. And he realized he's like, I do not like how that feels. And it's not because that's wrong or that's disrespectful, but he's just like, the organization that he had started building was him and friends. And he went from that to being, these people don't see me as a person. These people see me as like, you know, the boss with a capital B.
Right.
And so kind of what we did for them was like, how could we turn leadership back into uh, people to like their field crew? And so a lot of it was, how can we humanize them? How can we get their faces, their voices in front of their team consistently, so that when they see those people the next time, they think they know them already. I think that's kind of the magic of podcasts in particular, is when you listen to a podcast, if you're a consistent listener, Paul, I'm sure you've got plenty of listeners who have this kind of feeling, who have actually not met you, um, but because they've spent so much time with you, they feel like they know you. If they ran into you in an airport, I think there would be a little bit of like that. Oh wait, shoot, have I actually met this guy, or have I just listened to his podcast enough?
Right.
And so in that same way, I think something like that really makes a lot of sense for especially construction, because the teams are so distributed, and those teams often have a lot of like windshield time. But
So what did you do and how did it work?
yeah, so we created a podcast, an internal podcast. It was not meant to be posted externally. It was not meant to be some sort of marketing campaign. It was purely supposed to be something that connects the team, that makes people remember that they're part of something bigger than the crew on a particular job that day. And
Mhm.
so we started filming podcast. We strategized what are like the messaging that like they want to really kind of consistently communicate to their team. Some of it was core values. Some of it was why we take on these kinds of jobs. And so it was really this like internal education um, that was also sort of like the mask for how can we make our team be more connected, and how can we help our team get to know their leadership as people and not as uh, by their title.
Right. Okay. And so the end result was he felt better or the company worked better. What was the end
Yes,
result?
yeah. So a lot of it was they were now then able to start bringing on other field leaders onto the podcast, and they were using it as like a teaching tool. They're hearing from a general superintendent who'd been there for a couple years, but it's certainly been in the industry for a very long time, and kind of going over like, hey, here's why we train this way. here's why we're doing these things. And they're able to, they've got better retention numbers now. They're have like more clarity on how they kind of tell that story internally as well as externally. And they really weren't able to get to that kind of position without um, taking like their internal communication seriously.
So you
Because
would say you're sort of an expert in improving relationships and communication on a business level.
yes, yeah, and so I think kind of like my tool belt is going to be content. So it would be video, photo, and messaging, and so a lot of that is just kind of problem solving. What do we believe about ourselves, and where is that disconnect? Whether that's with our employees or with our our client base or potential customers. It's really
Right.
kind of solving that, and the tools are content.
So can you give me maybe one of the smaller clients you've dealt with and how you've helped them in specifics?
Yeah. So a commercial landscaper who they have grown a good bit in the last 10 years, but one of the things they've pushed against is they are not interested in being acquired by private equity, which is definitely a big thing that's happening in that industry in particular.
Right.
Is
Right.
it's all about positioning yourself so that a much larger firm or um, just a private equity firm
Well,
who
selling
is
out
not
has become
associated.
the badge of courage, sort of like the exit strategy, right? Which that didn't
Yeah,
used to even exist in construction, right? I mean, with
yeah,
it existed in a lot of the industries, but successful exit was not something that contractors talks about, right? It was like
hmm
if you were another kind of firm, but now private equity is coming in the construction industry, so I think sort of disrupting it because AI is disrupting everything else except construction. So AI is coming in, I mean, AI is causing people to leave their industries and private
hmm
equity coming into this industry. And so how did you convince the team that he wasn't building to sell them out, so to speak?
Yeah. So I mean, some of it was just I think for him, his approach to kind of training and being with his team was, it meant a lot to him to be with them. And so he had built a lot of these relationships, similar to the other client I had worked with. It started with him buying a mower and had grown from there. I think they maybe had 60 employees or something like that. But the thing that they were running into was they really tried and had great relationships with um, companies that like required white glove service, that required
Right.
that really high touch relationship. And what was happening was they were losing out bids to, businesses that didn't even have a website, where it was just like they were just cheaper. And that was really the end of the conversation. And so they're like, okay, we got to
Right.
find a way to make it really clear here's the kind of work we do, here's the level of work that we perform, and also how do we get that in front of the kinds of people that we already do work for but want to do more work for in the future. And so it was really transitioning their message, first on their website, um, to instead be, or I would say it used to be what essentially would come out if you typed into ChatGPT, commercial landscaping website. It was just extremely flat. It almost had nothing to do with them. If you took their logo off, it might not have been about them at all. And
Right.
going from that to consistently talking about uh, how they reinvest in the community, like all the people that work for that company live in the area, so they're caring for their neighbors, they're caring for the businesses in their own town. Some of it was getting customer testimonial videos to be like, hey, here's someone that we've worked with for 8 years that knows exactly what we do at the level that we do it. And how can we tell the people like them that here's what their experience is going to look like? And so there was nothing fake about it. There was nothing, manufactured, but it did take some soul searching on the front end to be like, hey, here's what we think is true about us. And then when you ask somebody else, they don't say any of those things.
Right.
And so we really doubled down on that, created a video campaign that really told their story and talked about why their expertise is so high level that they've got all of their leadership, people who are over irrigation, people who are over turf care, they all have college degrees in those sorts of fields that it's not like they came into the company mowing grass and just kind of learned on the job. They also had this, secondary education that spoke to that. So it's really just trying to tie that whole story together so that everyone's got a clear picture of what they do. Because like at the end of the day, um, the thing that they do at the price point they do it at is not going to apply to everybody, and
Right.
that's okay. But they're in that same place. There's also going to be people that they really appeal to, and our job and their job as well is to get in front of those kinds of people and not really worry about the folks who are never going to be a good fit in the first place.
Right. So, Alex, it sounds like you're, a master of communication. If people want to get in touch with you and say, I would say anybody who feels that they're not communicating well to their clients, subcontractors, or their employees, want to improve that communication, and they can tell, I mean, maybe the signs are they have a high turnover, the subs aren't staying with them, they are maybe getting a negative view now and then. It's just they feel they're not communicating their message to the people they need to communicate it to. I would say that
Yep.
you can help. So if you feel that's true and you'd like to have Alex's input, how do they do that, Alex?
Yeah, so the probably the easiest ways would be either find me on LinkedIn, Alex Horton, and then you could also go to 𝗀𝗲𝗄𝐿�creative.com, and that has ways to get in touch with me. You can fill out a form, just kind of answer a couple questions about what you think you might need and what sort of like the problems you're running into. Or another easy way is Alex at 𝗀𝗲𝗄�creative.com. One of those
Okay.
ways, you can definitely get in touch with me. Would love to have any conversation, whether that's to produce something or just to kind of talk through, hey, this is not working. Why do you think that might be? I love those
And they'll actually
conversations.
get to talk to you, not a bunch of your staff. You're the man, right?
Yeah, I'm the man.
Okay, cool. Well, I would suggest if you feel like you're having communication issues with your clients, your subcontractors, or your, employees, I think Alex is a good guy to hone that communication down. So thanks, Alex. I appreciate you being here. It sounds like you have very unique talent.
I appreciate it, Paul. Thanks for having me on.